Hi, so in this tutorial, we're going to be explaining recursion using a real life scenario. The goal is to refactor an existing code base so we can use a recursive approach to rewrite the existing implementation. An example of the real life use case is the username generation feature on Bidastry. So during registration process, the user is given a default username and the username is generated off their first name. Now, the logic behind that is basically a do while loop, right? That checks if we have someone else that has that username. If somebody has that username, there's no need to generate a random username for them. But if somebody does not have the username, we proceed to dashboard. In the code right away, like I mentioned, is a do while loop. What we are checking for is that we want to make sure that if someone has that username, we need to generate a default username for them, right? All this happens during the registration process, like I mentioned. So what we want to do here is basically refactor this from a do while loop to use a recursive function or a recursive method. Right, now let me go over the code blocks again. Here we have a random number native method that we are using to generate the random numbers. The example is 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we explode in PHP, more like pick the first name. If the person's name is Chidebre Chokode, we'll pick the first name, and that first name is the base username, and we concatenate that with the number that we generated, which you can see as an example here is 1, 2, 3, actually 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the do while loop, we check if is this username existing in the database. Let's say Chidi 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it there? If it's not there, we'll now skip to the other blocks of code. But if someone has that username already, we have to regenerate a random username and concatenate that number to the first name to get a default username for that person. More like the way some platform works, where you go to the platform, you check your profile, you already have a username or a default username or a default name, just stuff like that. Now we are going to refactor this to use recursion. Now that brings me to explaining recursion. This video is for, you probably understand recursion like I mentioned, but you want like a real life scenario or use case for recursion. Recursion is more like a method calling a function calling itself within itself, right? Now the function will call itself within itself and has to get to, but a condition has to be met for that process to be terminated, and the code flow will exist from that particular function. You know that when you go on Google and you type a search keyword and let's say you misspelled that, Google will say, do you mean so and so, right? Let's say if we do something like bread, right? Oh, no, let me say. So let's say we do something like engine. So we misspelled engine, right? And Google will say search instead of engine, or do you mean? You understand? Now, if you type recursion correctly, Google will say, do you mean recursion? And if you click on recursion, Google will still bring the statement, do you mean recursion? Now, this is a mind play, and it's actually trying to give you the result recursively. So as you're clicking on do you mean recursion, Google is still telling you, do you mean recursion? Do you mean recursion? Now, this is essentially what recursion is all about, right? It's more like a function calling itself within itself. It has to, the logic or the flow has to get to has to meet a certain condition before it can exit that block or else it has to keep on repeatedly calling itself within itself until a certain result is met. Now, let's go back to our code. So what we want to do is that we want to write a private method that where the refactoring of this particular logic will happen. So if you go here, let's clean this out and start from scratch. Have a private, we will call this user is generate user, okay, username generator. We are expecting a string. So we are typing in, we are expecting a string as our return type. We'll type hint a string as our parameter to, so this is first name to use as a username. How long is this? How lengthy is this username? Is this variable? So how lengthy is this? How lengthy is this variable? What do you think? Is it too long? Now we know that in this formal implementation, we have the do while loop where we want to check is this user. We want to check if the username exists. If it doesn't exist, we'll repeat the code block here in this two curly brackets. So we'll pick this because this is all we need to check with. Then we say is username taken, username taken, then I'll paste this such. Now, so this first name should be here. First name should be here. Now I want to check if username taken. If username is taken, that means if it exists, we'll want to get random numbers, then concatenate that, which is basically we'll copy this and first here. So we have this now. This is actually what we need to replace with this. Right. So this should be our new username then. New username. Again, we need a random number. We concatenate that. And what happens? So if the username is taken, generate a random number and you concatenate, then we have to like recursively perform this action again. Now we'll call this function inside this condition. Now we're going to recursively have to make our code perform this action again if the username has been taken. Right now, we'll return this username generator in the new username. So this is the recursive function. Else, don't need to write else. So then we can return first name to user's username here. First name to user's username. So what is simply happening here is that if we check for the user, right, and if the username is taken, we'll have to perform this action again. We have to generate random numbers, concatenate them, and perform this action again. So it's more like we are going back to this, right? We are going back to the first step here. So we're going back. So this is going back to the first step here and performing this action again. If it comes here, it goes back to this. But now, if the username has not been taken. If nobody has this username, it returns the first name that we want to use as a username. Yep, so that's simply what's happening. Then what we can do here is we'll take this out. We no longer have need of this. On the function new username, say BDS username. I just call the function. So name a variable, say BDS username, and call that method again using generator and the base name here. So one more thing, I feel we may not need, I don't think we need this username to assign again. Now that's redundant. So yeah, it feels good. So let's check this in action. So we have someone with the name Chidebere Chokode already existing on the platform. The desired result is that if we are trying to bring in another user and the person's name is Chidebere, the person should have a Chidebere with a random number. We'll register as Chidebere, right? Authorize, then click on Chidebere. That's it. So we have the Chidebere 98779, right? Now, this is trying to tell you that we have an existing name with Chidebere as their username. So we can't keep this person, this new person with the first name as Chidebere as the username. We need to generate random characters with the first name and assign it as their username. Once again, let me explain that we want to check, does this username exist? If it does exist, we need to generate random characters and do some concatenation. Then we'll call this method again. Now we are saying go back to step 1. Do you understand? We are saying go back to step 1. Now, the condition where this block, where this recursion can exist is that it will exist when, if this condition is false. If we have somebody, if this username does not exist, then this block of code will not run, and this aspect will get executed. So yeah, so I hope you have been able to understand one or two things about recursion. And if you don't know about Builderstreak is a platform that automatically helps people to track, share, and celebrate their creative progress. So if you are building in public, you are having 100 days of code, you can use Builderstreak to do that. And let me know your thoughts about this demonstration. Thanks. See you in the next video.